Well, I do believe it is time for another project. Number 15. Let's see. Number 15. Well, we have Vogue 1817, which is a multi-sectioned top. And I have one skirt, a purple flowered lined skirt. Now, I really don't think that there's going to be enough fabric in this to make this multi-section top. So I think I need to do some research, go on my Pinterest board and see if there's an idea for this. It's probably going to involve a trip to the thrift store to have things that will be in the same color palette to make this with. So with popcorn in hand, I was ready to do some exploring on Pinterest. And that starts with my board called Just Me. And right away, I found this one with the cute bird print. I also have this one saved, but it's not the one I remember, which happens to be just down the page a bit. And I did not know that this was connected to a Marcy Tilton Fabrics website. Upon initial glance, I like what I'm seeing. I did look around and their fabrics start at $18 a yard and go up. Most I saw were $25, $30, and in the $40 range. And after further investigation, their website says they have a curated collection of new and dead stock designer fabrics for fashion, sewing, decor, crafts, and more. We sell both knit fabrics and woven fabrics as yardage, special cuts, and full panels. Some of our designer fabrics come to us directly from the studio stash of top designer houses around the world and top fabric mills in Denmark, France, Italy, Japan, India, and the Netherlands that produce fabrics for the biggest names in fashion. And I will put a link in the description below if you're interested in checking them out. Now that I know which top from Pinterest I'm looking for, I thought I would first check my idea book to see if it was there. But it was not. So I decided to go back through all of my projects in the closet to see if it was with another project. Okay, so after going through all of my projects in the closet, I did not find this printed picture inside any of the projects, which I'm surprised at because it is one I have wanted to make that I found on Pinterest. What I did find was this stack of remnants in the closet, and it had no picture, no pattern with it, which I thought I had all decided long ago. I also found this bag, this pretty blue batik fabric in it with this Vogue 9112, which is very similar to the other Vogue that I wanted to make. And so I decided that I didn't think this fabric was well suited for this pattern, but this was. And so this will become a garment. I also went back through my pattern stash to see what else I had that would go well with this blue fabric. And I found Butterick 6211, this really nice retro dress. And so that's going to become a dress at a later date. Which leaves me with these two patterns that are both sleeveless, similar in the way that they are or can be done in a color blocking style. Yes, I have fabric for each one, but I don't have enough, which means I get to do the one thing I love the most, and that's go shopping at thrift stores. Now, I did go through my stash. I have 2 bins of cotton fabrics that I have been saving because I want to make a quilt, but most of what I have are lots of vibrant prints. I don't have many solid colors, and none that was going to go with this. I really only found this one piece of cotton that I could use with, well, either one. So what I would like to do is not just go shopping at the thrift stores I normally go shopping at. No, I would like to take the time and look around Central Florida and see what else exists out there. So let's go on a road trip. Okay, so the goal for today is to see how many garments I can find that are mostly 100% cotton to go with my fabric swatches here. I did take the purple floral skirt apart. I do not want to walk into a thrift store with a garment and have to explain to anybody what it is. So now I have pieces of fabric. So I'm looking for some solids, lavender, a green, lime green, olive green, something to go with this, some light grays to go with this one. And so the first place I'm at is called Uptown Cheapskate. If you've ever heard or been to a store called Plato's Closet, then Uptown Cheapskate is for you. They pay cash for clothes on the spot, giving you a fast and convenient way to refresh your closet and earn extra money. You bring them your gently used but stylish pieces and then shop their constantly updated selection of name brand fashions. In other words, it's a great place for teens and college students. Well, that was a bust. It's just like a Plato's Closet if you are familiar with those in your area, but their prices are a lot higher than your average thrift store, which is typical for a place that will actually give you money for clothing that is still in really good condition. So now it's on to a place called the Hope Chest. Never been here, so let's go see what it's like. The Hope Chest is a community-focused organization that partners with many agencies in Central Florida who refer their families to receive items like clothing, shoes, household items, school supplies, furniture, and more. It's a small location but filled to the brim with great deals, and I did find one matching green dress, but it was made from a gauze-type fabric which was too thick, and so I didn't buy it. Next up was Amy's walk-in consignment shop, filled with upscale clothing, jewelry, and shoes. And lots of Lily Pulitzer. Well, that place was out of my price range. I walked in, it's a cute little boutique. First garment I picked up was $68. And it matched perfectly, but I left right away because their prices were too much for me. Next up was a place I've been wanting to visit called Out of the Closet, an organization benefiting AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Inside it was super clean and well organized, and their pricing was very affordable. They offer free HIV testing from trained clinicians and have an in-house pharmacy as well. Out of the Closet is a winner in my book. I found 4 shirts, all matching the colors that I needed very closely, which I will show you when I get home. Now I've got one more place to go, and that is my favorite that I go to all the time. It's called OMG. Today is Cinco de Mayo, and they're having a 75% off 2 of their colored tag clothing. I need something that will match the darker lavender on this fabric, and then we'll be done. OMG is by far my favorite place to thrift. It has a huge selection to choose from and is very well organized by size and color. They are always having big sales, especially around the holidays, where sometimes their clothing will be discounted 75% off. So here are the 5 shirts that I got from the thrift store. These 4 came from the Out of the Closet store, and this dark lavender one came from the OMG that I was at last. This one is 100% cotton. This one is all linen. This one is linen and cotton. This one is rayon. And this one is 100% cotton. And yes, I know this has a faded spot on the front, but that's not going to matter because they're all going to get cut apart and used in different areas in the patterns. These 3 matched super nice with the colors in this skirt. I'm going to try to save this one and this one for this one here. And I know that this gray does not exactly match this gray, but I didn't want a dark gray. I don't want a super pop of color. I want the colors to be muted. And I think this will go well with the fabric, the color that it is. Now, before I cut all of these apart, I am going to make a mock-up for both of these patterns to see just how they fit and see what adjustments I need to make with them. And at first glance, this size 12 is way too big. Just look how open those armholes are. The front neckline is not laying flat at all, and it's way too big overall. And when I pinch in the sides to take them in, I get the fun of now needing a bust dart on one side and probably taking in the bust seam on the other. I think I just need to cut a smaller size, which looks much better as a size 10, but it's still too baggy. It looks better after pinning the front seam in more and adding a bust dart on the other side. I still think the sides could be taken in more, and I definitely need to cut down the back neckline. All that's left is to solve the issue of the gaping armhole. I need to raise it up 1.25 inches, just around the bottom. Now we're getting somewhere. I like how this fits, and I've probably taken this down to a size 8. I know this gets a collar, but I still don't like how it gaps at the top neckline. And I'm wondering how to fix that when I cut out the front. Here's what it looks like with some fabric added to the underarm, and it is much, much better. I think I'm ready to move on to mock-up number 2. Oh boy, this is not going to work. The size medium it told me to cut was way too big. Let's cut this into a small. That fits a whole lot better. And the only part that I did not cut smaller was the armholes. I did not want to open it up too much, but I can see from it being a smaller size that I definitely need to go ahead and cut the small around the armhole openings. That means it is time to cut all of these shirts apart and start laying out the colors on the pieces to see how this will all come together. 22 pieces. 12 pieces. Now, I did not film any of the process of me cutting these out. I probably spent about 6 hours yesterday on all of that. I even drew some diagrams so I could map out where I wanted all the colors to go. And the only color or shirt that I ended up not using was the dark lavender. With all of the other colors that I'm using, this was just too dark, and I wanted things to be soft and kind of muted. Now, I did learn something yesterday in the process of cutting this all out, and this is something that I don't think I've ever been aware of. Now, please do not laugh. I have been working with patterns for a very long time. I've been sewing since I was 14 years old. On the back of patterns, it will sometimes give you finished garment measurements. And a lot of times that's not a lot. It's usually like the length of it. And I've always been at the mercy of the size you're supposed to cut according to your body measurements. Now I know how to read a pattern, and I know where they mark the bust line and the waistline. What I did not realize that they do on a lot of patterns is that they will give you the finished garment measurements at the bust line and the waistline. But I have a bone to pick with these patterns because according to my measurements, I'm a bust 34. And on this particular one, it wants me to cut a size 12. When I read these finished garment measurements, a 12 in the bust is 40.5 inches. And if I'm a 34, that's 6.5 inches bigger than me. Why would I want to make a garment that is 6.5 inches bigger than me? And if I would have realized this a long time ago, that here when it says a size 8 is a bust finished 38, I would have gone ahead and cut the size 8. Because when I look at this pattern and these pictures on here, they do not look oversized. When I had this mock-up on to begin with, it did not fit like this. It was huge on me. I have learned a very valuable lesson that from now on, I am going to definitely be checking the measurements on the pattern to see what the finished garment measurements are before actually cutting out my pattern and probably saving me a lot of time and headache. With that being said, it's time to start the assembly. And I'm going to start with Vogue 9112. That starts with stay stitching the center front and left front pieces. And then these 3 pieces get sewn together. This pattern requires no interfacing, no zippers, no buttons, just thread. And I'm not even going to serge off any of my seam allowances on the inside. One thing that is very important because of all the different shaped pieces is to be sure you add all of your markings on each pattern piece so they can line up correctly. Next, the lower side front is gathered onto the bottom. As a note, I do have some seams on a couple of my pieces since I'm using men's shirts because I only had so much fabric to work with, and none of which bothers me one bit because this is an upcycled garment. And oops, before I do that, I need to stay stitch this curve. And the front is done for now. On to the back. Sew the left and right pieces together. Then on goes the bottom strip. Next, they have you sew the shoulders together And then comes the most important part, the pockets, which gets sewn on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then you sew down the sides and all around the pockets. Clip the seam allowance above the pockets and press your seam open flat. On to the final section of the body of this dress on the lower side, which takes more stay stitching and gathering stitches around the top of the piece, like this. Now we're on to the neckline, which of course needs stay stitching. This collar was to be cut on the fold, but I have a seam down the middle because I did not have enough of the white shirt to cut it on the fold. What they have you do is sew pinches between the 2 circles, which I don't know if you can see this on camera. This creates a pleat down the middle. When it's sewn, you press it to one side and then hem the unnotched edge and ends like this. And this is where your markings are very important as you line up the center front and other arrows. Baste stitch the center front and bottom edge together. Then this gets sewn onto the neck edge, which once it's pinned on, I'm turning the dress inside out to sew inside the tube. That looks pretty good. Now you turn the collar down and it gets a neck facing. You sew the ends of the facing together and then press under the unnotched edge 5/8 of an inch. Trim it down 1/4 of an inch and sew it to the neck opening. Trim the seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch and then top stitch the facing in place to hide that neck seam by wrapping the folded edge around the seam and sewing it down flat below the collar. The armhole opening also gets a facing, which takes more stay stitching, yay! And basically works the same as the neck facing by pressing under the hem, trimming it to 1/4 of an inch, pin and stitch it around the armhole, trim the seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch, wrap the seam allowance, and sew it down to the inside of the armhole opening. Finally, the hem, and I'm sewing 1/4 of an inch double turned hem. Now it's on to Vogue 1817 and its 22 pieces. This pattern, on the other hand, starts with using a serger on the lower edge of the upper back, as well as the unnotched edge of the hem facing, which gets sewn on first. Now, one thing this pattern does not specify, and that is after you trim the seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch, you need to clip the curve because this seam curves up in the opposite direction when the facing is turned under. To make the other side turn under, you miter the corner by stitching the hem facing to the lower edge. Turn the point right side out and press. Next, you serge the upper and lower edges of the lower right back. This piece gets gathering stitches and pleated. The lower left front gets serged and pleated as well. Then these 2 pieces get sewn together like this. And then sewn to the bottom of the upper back. To sew the facings down, pin it together on the outside or the right side, and then flip it over to sew the facings in place. This makes it look like the bottom sections are coming out from underneath. The one problem I have encountered so far with this pattern is that the lavender piece was too long and it did not line up with the upper back. To fix that, I just deepened the pleat a bit and it seems to lay nicely on the other side. On to the front, which starts with sewing 1/4 of an inch double turned hem on the long edge and a reinforcement stitch at the large circle so you can clip the seam allowance. Next is another hem facing, which is sewn just like the one on the upper back. You just have a point at the very bottom of the center front. The lower right front is the same process with serging the edges, gathering it onto the lower right front, and sewing the facing down. And yes, I saved the butterfly. It's actually separate sections sewn together separately, and the antenna is hand sewn, so I had to think strategically of where to put this. The only thing I'm not sure of is this lavender shirt. I love the color, but the rayon fabric is just so soft. For now, I'm moving on with the shoulders and the pocket, which there is only one of. Don't ask me why, it's just the way this pattern is designed. Next, you sew the sides together and all around the pocket. Press it towards the front and sew the top of the pocket opening to the front-facing seam. The left front also gets the double-turned hem on the long edge. Then you stay stitch the curved side and pin on the upper front, clipping the seam allowance so that it all comes together nicely like this. The lower front piece gets serged, pleated, sewn to the folded facing, and stitched. And lastly, sew the shoulder and the side seam together. This collar is in 4 pieces, which they wanted in 4 different colors, but I'm making mine all in the off-white. Piece 1 gets gathering stitches on one side and pleated on the other, then a hem across the top edge. Piece 2 gets the top edge hemmed, and you sew it to piece 1 on the end with all the pleats. Piece 3 has you serge and press the top edge, and piece 1 gets gathered onto it. Piece 4 looks like this and gets a small little sewn tack in the middle. Flip the 3 pieces over with the right side up and overlap piece 4 and baste it together. Then this gets sewn to the neck edge, and I am so happy to report that my collar and neckline all match up. This pattern has you wrap the neck seam with a binding, but does not tell you to trim the seam allowance at all, just to sew this on with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Wrap it, slip stitch it, and you're done. But I hated it, and so I decided to rip it off, trim the seam allowance down, sew the binding back on, wrap the seam, and sew it down to the shirt just below the collar, which I like a lot better. By this point, I was getting quite tired of working on this shirt because there are just so many details. Even with the hem, what seemed simple had me studying the directions for quite a while to make sure that I was getting the front turned under correctly. And basically, I'm sewing a double turned hem all the way around the bottom. Now before I finish the armhole, I'm moving on to the part that I'm dreading the most, the front and all of those wonderful buttonholes. The front fold over part is easy. You just fold back the collar and sew it across the top, turn it right side out, and top stitch it. The bottom seam allowance is pressed up, and then fold the front over, stitching it in place along the same stitching line where the facing is connected. And after much contemplation, I think the white buttons look the best, so it's on to the buttonholes. I figured it was best if I practiced on some scrap fabric to see how this rayon fabric would work. And after sewing a couple of practice buttonholes, I felt that it needed some iron-on interfacing to the folded over facing, which would give it some more stability. So I decided before sewing in all of those buttonholes that I actually needed to try this shirt on to see if it fit. And it does, but there are several things about it that I hate. One is this collar. It does not stand up very well. It just flops around. It doesn't function like the collar on the dress, the first dress that I made. And so it's got to go. Now in the pattern on view B, it actually has you make a collar that folds down and lays flat. So I'm going to do that instead in the same cream color. Secondly, I hate this light lavender rayon fabric. It just is not the same as the stiffness of the cotton, and I just think it looks ugly when I had it on, and so it's got to go. I actually revisited what it would look like if I used the darker lavender, and I happen to really like it. And so I'm going to replace all of these with this. And thirdly, I really don't like this green. It may match the color of the leaves, but when I have it on, I just don't like it. And so I'm going to replace all of these sections with a creamy white. And instead of watching me do all of that process all over again, we're going to move to the final result in 3, 2, 1. Well, what a journey this has been. 2 Vogue patterns, one easy, one complicated, and I am very happy with the result of both. So let's review these 2 patterns, shall we? Vogue 9112 is an easy pattern, and yes, it is very easy to put together. There's no zipper, buttons, interfacing, or serging, just sewing it together. And even though there are some geometrical shapes, it was very easy to follow the directions to put them together, and there are no sleeves. The only tricky part for a beginner might be the binding for the armholes. I cut a size small, and there were no other adjustments needed. I really like the look and fit of it, and I would definitely make more of these in the future, as it is a great way to use things that I find at the thrift store. Now for Vogue 1817, which says it is an average pattern, and according to Google, average means it is one step above an easy pattern. And after putting this together, I would have to say that it is a lot more complicated than that. It has a lot of pieces and facings and takes some skill to put this together. I did remeasure my mock-up before cutting into my real fabric, and I had indeed shrunk it down to a size 8. I really like the way this shirt has turned out with the colors that I decided to use. And I think before, with all of the other colors, with the light lavender and the green, it was just too much and it clashed. But I think with the darker purple, it makes the flowers pop. Now you might be asking yourself, what happened to the collar? Well, I did cut and make the other collar, but view A and view B are actually different styles. This one is very open and it's meant to have the floppy, flouncy collar, whereas view B is more closed up and this collar works well. But I made it out of a stiff fabric and it didn't look right either. So after having it on with no collar, standing in front of the mirror, I really liked the way that it looked, and I decided to just use the neck binding to finish off the edge. I also sewed a much wider hem. Because of the curve of the fabric, when I did the double turned, half-inch turned hem, it made it warp and bow out. And what I did was I used a gathering stitch to pull the curve in so that it would lay much flatter when I sewed it. So will I make this pattern in the future? Probably not. I like the way it looks, but it is hours of work. I have learned over my years of sewing that patterns are not a one-size-fits-all, and why when I ran my sewing business, I did not make custom garments for people. I can make clothing for myself, but I felt more comfortable taking a garment that you purchased from the store and making it fit you. The trickiest part about all of this is knowing where to take a garment in to make it fit better, and also knowing the difference between something that needs alterations or something that needs to be cut a different size. I have also learned where to find the finished garment measurements on a pattern so that next time in the future, I will have a better idea of what size to cut. One piece of advice I can give you when it comes to sewing with patterns is that you are allowed to make changes. You don't have to make it exactly like the pattern tells you to make it. It needs to fit you, and it needs to be something that you will want to wear in the end. One of my goals in the near future is to take some pattern drafting classes. I would like to learn more about how to solve problems when it comes to fit issues with patterns. I understand how to alter clothes very well, but I am a beginner when it comes to getting a good fit from a pattern. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and stay tuned as the sewing madness continues and we find out what's next out of the jar.